Hello, I'm happy to be here today with you. Let me introduce myself. My name is Christy Van Tassel, and I am one of the elementary guides here at Many Rivers. Today, I'd like to share with you a bit more about our approach and our pedagogy and what the Montessori world here at Many Rivers looks like, specifically what our elementary communities look like. Before I get too far along, I'd like to further introduce myself by mentioning that I am a Montessori parent as well as a Montessori guide. I have 4 children who have journeyed through or are currently in classrooms here at Many Rivers. I have an alumni this year. I have a 9th grader who had her last year here at Many Rivers last year. I also have a 6th grade son who is in the upper elementary community, a 4th grade son who is in the upper elementary community as well, and I have a 1st grade daughter who is brand new to the elementary program this year. So I have a bit of personal perspective down through our toddler program all the way through the middle school. I also am a founding member of the school. When we started our first year, we just had a handful of teachers, and I was lucky to be here at the inception of Many Rivers and got to watch it grow and become this bright and vibrant community that it is today. I'm also the daughter of a retired Montessori head of school and Montessori teacher down in the St. Paul area. And my younger sister is also a guide here at Many Rivers, Miss Becca, in the Chester Creek Children's House. So to say that I'm passionate about Montessori, it might be a little bit of an understatement, but I'm really happy to be here to share with you today a bit about what we are about and hopefully answer a few of the things that you have been wondering about. Without further ado, I'd like to share meeting the elementary child's needs through a Montessori pedagogy. We are an AMI certified school, and what that means is we belong to the Association Montessori Internationale, which is the recognition entity that was founded by Dr. Montessori herself. It does have a large amount of standards for us to follow, rigorous standards, in fact, but that are valuable in upholding the integrity of what we do each day and how we're meeting and championing the needs of the children here at school. Some of those things include our class sizes, having the proper materials available within the classrooms, ensuring that all of the trained guides not only have completed a college background, but also have diplomas in various levels of the Montessori pedagogy. So we're going to be talking today a little bit more about what that looks like. Now, Dr. Montessori started this approach well over 150 years ago, or she was born about 150 years ago, and she viewed education in a really radical way, especially in that era of traditional education being mainstream, really proper, quiet, privileged children sitting in desks facing forward. She viewed education as something greater, something more, and she calls us to consider education as an aid to life. So we really take that to heart here at Many Rivers, and we are considering the whole child and their development and what they need each day uniquely as individuals to fulfill their greatest potentials and to move forward to having a full and joyful and productive life. We know that children achieve their highest potential when the environment supports their developmental needs. And this isn't just true for the children here at Many Rivers or even the children in the Twin Ports area. This is true universally for all children, and I would argue all human beings, even we adults, reach our highest potential when our environment is suited to support what we need. Here are 3 photos that you can see on my screen. One is from my colleague Courtney's lower elementary classroom in Cloquet River, the first photo here. The middle photo is actually a photo from my community in French River, lower elementary. And then on the far right here, we have a photo of the outdoor environment, and that is intentional. You can see by looking at these photos that in the elementary realm, the classroom setting is designed for independent work, for collaborative work. It's beautiful. Things are open to the children to have hands-on experiences with. And we have the outdoors here for a really big reason. Dr. Montessori calls all children to have a connection to nature and to outdoor experiences. And at the elementary level, we even have a lot of learning opportunity, formal lessons that would be happening outside in conjunction with unstructured exploration, lots of hiking, going out. And of course, we have this gorgeous field here right at our front doorstep that we use for lessons and for lunches and for recess and for activities. We do a lot of cross-country skiing. My community hikes to Hartley every week for a full morning work cycle of 3 hours, and we have various biology lessons that happen there, history stories. Today, actually, my hair might look a little funny. I just got back from a hike this morning, and we did flint and steel in the tall pines and got to start learning about the angle to strike and how we can build fires and the science behind that. So we're really looking to get the children outdoor as much as we can for meaningful hands-on experiences, even in our climate. It is a value and a priority that we have here at Many Rivers. And the last text item on this slide, that Montessori environments change due to the changing needs of the child. This is really important. We know that as children pass through stages of development, their needs change, their psychology changes. And we take it upon ourselves to be proactive and to provide them with resources and physical environments and the approach of the adults that's needed to match what they need at that time. If your child was here at Many Rivers for our Children's House programs, or if your child participated in a preschool setting or another setting outside of Many Rivers as a younger learner, you may have observed that the room had some of these common things that I already described, but it also was set up for more individual work. The younger child is interested in what they're interested in. They're not as socially aware of what's occurring around them. They're not necessarily doing a lot of collaborative group work. They might work in parallel with a friend or sit near someone, but they're really focused on their own activity and mastery of that concept. Therefore, the room is designed to meet those needs. The Children's House and the toddler communities here and almost anywhere you would observe have really small furniture designed just for these children. We have dishwashers that are about 18 inches tall, countertops that are at child level, cabinets they can open. All the instruments and tools and peelers are proportionate to the size of the child's body, therefore allowing them to act independently to fulfill the task that they are engaged in to meet their developmental needs. This is a value of Montessori education. Now, I'd like to talk a little more about that prepared environment that we are carefully considering. And when we talk about the prepared environment, we're talking about the physical spaces, indoor and outdoor. We're also talking about the psychological environment or the human relational environment, what we as community members and guides and teachers and assistants and all those who are in the presence of the children are bringing, and how we're posturing ourselves and how we're interacting with the children. We call that the prepared environment as well. We are based significantly in a whole child approach. Of course, academics are incredibly important, and we are holding on to that, but we're also considering the whole child, their physical needs, their intellectual needs, their emotional and social growth, their personality. All of these are also important things that we want to hold dear and consider when supporting the child. We know that our prepared environments and our approach for elementary learners in particular really need to be appealing to the child. We prepare the environment specifically to entice the children at whatever age they're at. In the elementary realm, that looks like a lot of imaginative, big picture things. I have this beautiful Smithsonian solar system hanging down front and center in the classroom, and every child that ever walks in sees that and is instantly engaged in thinking about it and asking questions or observing it. We have a big bearded dragon. Right away, you can see that when you walk into my community. All of the classrooms are set up in a way here that is going to appeal to the psychology and curiosity and engagement of that child. Because we recognize that, especially at the elementary level and beyond, when we're having multiple subjects and we are concerned about academics and we are hopefully providing opportunities for the child to engage in a wealth of experiences in subject areas, not everything is everyone's favorite. So we want to aim to make it as appealing and enticing and alive as we can. There's a lot of pageantry that goes into it. We're great storytellers, and we bring specimens and samples in and examples to entice the questions and to engage that curiosity of the elementary child. We know that they want to know the reasons behind everything. They want to know how, they want to know why, they want to try it. They want to go deep and broad. Another hallmark of the elementary prepared environment is that we embrace what we call freedom of choice. Now, we offer the children great freedoms within limits. Every freedom that we grant has a corresponding responsibility or limit that goes with that. And we offer these freedoms to each child individually and to the groups collectively so that they are free to explore and to build their independence and have hands-on opportunities and collaborative opportunities, to have sensorial options available to enhance their learning. Now, of course, one of these freedoms is movement in Montessori. We do not ask the children to sit in a specific desk. We actually don't even have desks. We have tables, group tables. We don't assign them seats and ask them to remain there quietly for the day. They are free to get up and to move around and to access the materials that they need to complete their work, to shift gears and work on the floor on a big project with friends, or a standing height table, or to go out to the hallway, or to use the piano or the science area, or whatever it is that they need to complete their goals for that day and to follow up from the lessons that they have had. But with that freedom of movement is the responsibility that you're going to move in a way that is safe for the community, that's respecting the focus and the work of others, and that you are responsible to your work. So you're moving around, but with purpose, to get what you need and to be where you feel you can achieve what you're setting out to do. And of course, all of these things happen under the construct of guidance of the adults. But we give the freedom with that responsibility. And if it isn't working successfully, then we have a conversation about that and we try again another time. Now, I'd like to speak a little more in depth about the lessons and the work of the children. What is it that we're doing inside the classroom community or outside that is working toward building that intellect and meeting the needs of that child? Lessons in the elementary community are mostly given in small groups based on both interest and readiness for a concept. In the children's house, in a Montessori setting, and in a toddler community in a Montessori setting, lessons or presentations, as you may have heard them called, are usually always given to one child at a time. And that is pedagogically accurate to meet the needs of a child of that age. They're very interested in their own work. Each child is ready for a different concept at a variable time. They might not be ready to begin addition, and we wouldn't call them to that lesson, even in a kindergarten setting, until they were showing readiness of knowing their numbers and sequencing numbers, for example. But when the child comes to the elementary level, something has changed in their psychology. Usually in that kindergarten, first grade year, there's a social awakening that occurs. The children become aware of what's happening around them and what their peers are doing and why they're doing it. And they want to be near each other. They want to collaborate. They want to communicate. You may have reflected on your own school experience, and we weren't allowed to talk at school, and maybe you were really good at that, or maybe it was hard for you to sit facing forward and not turn and chat to your friend, even if it was about the content of your work. It wasn't allowed, which is really a challenge, because what we know about human psychology and the needs of the children at this age, they're made to communicate. They're made to collaborate at this age. So we're fighting against their development and their human tendencies if we try to stop that. So instead, within our communities, we're trying to harness that and leverage that toward beautiful, purposeful activity. And therefore, that contributes to the group lessons. If they're having the lessons with a group of peers who are interested in that content and ready for that content, they can collaborate and learn even more together. We have our children for a 1 to 3 year cycle in the lower elementary, typically 3 years. But if you have a full elementary, which is 1st through 6th, you might have your students for up to 6 years. Therefore, we are experts at gauging the relationship and the development of the children and knowing when they're coming into readiness for something. And we're also able to plan and schedule lessons and opportunities within a 3-year span or a 6-year span versus just a 1-year timetable of a traditional setting. So if I have someone where the national curriculum might be telling me, oh, it's time to learn how to reduce fractions, but I, as the guide, know they're not there yet. They're not really even understanding what a fraction is. I'm not going to push them along into reducing fractions before I know they really understand what a fraction is and maybe how to add fractions with common denominators. So that factor of giving lessons when the children are ready for them is really of value to the child and to the whole scope of the learning. Our children in the community, as I've mentioned, the work is collaborative. Occasionally you'll have children doing an individual work, but very much the lessons are given in small groups, so therefore the follow-on activities are often collaborative as well, because there's a lot of excitement and interest in what they've just learned, and they want to go be turned free after the formal lesson, and they want to practice what we just talked about, or do more research and add on to their understanding, or practice reducing those fractions together, or do some more research on the first peoples of North America. Now, this collaborative active work, again, is appealing to the psychology of the elementary child. We know and embrace that imagination and creative expression of understanding are what the children demonstrate to us as they master concepts and follow through with their work. They have this incredible power of an active faculty of imagination, and they're very creative. They want to go broad and deep and make art and music and these big elaborate dioramas, and they want hands-on opportunities to demonstrate what they understand. If we just talked about botany and 2 types of roots being taproots and fasciculate roots, I promise you they're going to want to go outside and pull plants or weeds until they find those roots and can classify them in a hands-on manner. And if we're in a deep freeze, they're going to want to plant radish seeds and watch them grow and then practice pulling the roots. Children are very imaginative and hands-on, and we want to equip them with as many of those enrichments as we can. In the photos here on this screen, we can see in the classrooms here at Many Rivers how this happens on a daily basis. The first photo here, we have children working with the 3 states of matter and seeing a solid go straight to a gas in sublimation. And as you can see their faces, they're just ecstatic. They love it. And they will always remember that because they saw it firsthand, and it's not just a term in a science book. Here on the second photo, we have children practicing mass, and they're finding objects in the classroom and calculating the mass of each object in the balance scale, recording it. And of course, as you can imagine, they want to find the next heaviest thing, and they want to find things that are equivalent and get that scale to balance. We do a lot of work outside when we can, and this third photo is a photo of two children from my current community, and we had the second great story, and they have this gorgeous timeline that I painted a while back, and we take it outside and we learn about how there was coming of living things to the planet Earth at the very beginning with single-celled organisms, and this timeline goes all the way through up to man coming to Earth. And we get to see the great diversity of plants and animals and the lifelines of different species and how things changed over time. And at the top, there are scientific terms, historical terms like the Mesozoic era, for example. And we, on the last photo here, see a child, that's actually my niece, with a sandpaper globe and a lamp. And you may not know by seeing the photo instantaneously what she's engaged in there with a group of her peers, but she's following on from a lesson that I had just given on the solstices and the equinoxes and why we have them. And she is replicating that concept by performing revolutions of the earth, represented by the globe, around the sun, represented by that light bulb, and gets to see why, because of the tilt of the axis, we have periods of equinox and solstices and different amounts of daylight and sunlight based on where we live. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about our specific Montessori elementary curriculum. Dr. Montessori coined the term cosmic education for our pedagogical approach for the 6 to 12-year-old child. And if you ever get bored and want to look it up in the dictionary, there are multiple definitions for the word cosmic. And more commonly, especially in our time of living, we think of it as this mysterious, sort of mystical term. But really, cosmic also is referring to the bigger picture, the interconnectedness and the order of things. And that is what Dr. Montessori was trying to relay to us in our approach. We want our approach to be interconnected and alive and interdisciplinary and deep with order to what we're doing as well. So the Train Guide offers, we have 5 great stories that are told throughout the year in any AMI Montessori elementary classroom globally. Those 5 stories are told each year. It's a bit of a tradition. They're very big, broad concepts. And we then spend the next 6 years filling in the details and interrelationships of these subjects that we are sharing with the children and bringing to life. There are lots of key lessons and follow-ups that come from those great stories that are opening big subject areas and big concepts to the children. All the while we're aiming to be sparking imagination and engaging their reasoning mind, getting them to ask those questions and want to dig deeper, which does lead to further explorations and constructs of learning. Our lessons offer that big picture first, and then we fill in those details over time. And we value that there is great intersectionality between subject areas. If you're talking about mathematics, of course, you've got history in there with the Babylonians and the Arabic numerals and all sorts of things. And we share that with the children. And you see that with art and geometry and architecture, biology and geography, what's happening to the abiotic factors, the land on Earth versus those biotic factors, the living things and the ecosystem. So they really are interconnected, and we want the children to not have to make those connections in their own mind in high school, but really from the beginning realize, oh, there are these relationships between the subject areas, which is a really powerful empowerment to the children, if you will. Now, the photos on this screen are from, I think they're from this year, actually. Yep, we're wearing masks. On the far left, this is in my community, and this is the telling of the first great story. And this happens usually on the first Friday of the school year. It's very exciting. It's probably the longest lesson we share, but it has 5 science experiments in it, including the eruption of a volcano. And this is telling the story of the coming of the universe and how Earth was created. It's very alive for the children. We use watercolored charts that I've made, this volcano, and each of our elementary communities is doing the same thing on the same timeline with their materials in their classroom. And when the children leave the lower elementary and they go to the upper elementary, they remember these things, and every year there's more details that they're recalling and more connections that are being made as they retell and hear that story. In the middle here, I like to talk about this picture because another concept of Montessori education across all ages is we embrace sharing and giving the concrete before we expect or introduce the abstract. And a great example of this is in math. Anytime we can have a physical experience, a concrete material to demonstrate a concept before we move into the abstract. Take, for example, division, long division. We have materials, racks and tubes, which were genius, where the children can manipulate these beads on boards to go through the process of distributive long division in the physical form before we expect them to just solve a long division problem and understand what is being represented through that process. We do get there to that abstract writing only on paper stage, but it's only after we've had mastery and understanding and clarity with the physical materials and all the steps that build over time until you get to that point of mastery. Here in the photo, this is a really early lesson, usually in the first month of school or so of first grade, or whenever a child joins the Montessori community. And this is showing concretely the value of a number and the hierarchies of numbers and the relationships of numbers. You can't see it in the photo, but there's this tiny little unit cube that represents 1 unit. And as you can see in the photo, there's this giant green million cube, which is the unit value of millions. And everything in between. We have the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, the 10,000s, 100,000s, and that million. And they can see the relationships physically between those values. They can see that all the units form a cube, and all the tens form a line, and all the hundreds form a square. And that units in Montessori are represented by green, which is a continuation from the materials in our Children's House program if they've already seen that. So these are just some examples of our curriculum coming to life with purpose in our communities. Now, I would like to share with you in brief the formal subject areas that we are considering in the elementary years within a Montessori classroom. We are thinking about and presenting formally in the area of math, geometry, language, biology, geography, history, art, music, and movement. Of course, I've already mentioned how movement is purposefully built into all of our experiences, but it is also, we are considering PE skills that would be in the national curriculum, and also those more formal movement opportunities that children would be receiving in any school. Here you can see some photos of the skeletal system getting labeled by children. Here we are in the art room on the second photo we had someone doing a coming in. This was pre-COVID, and this person is an artist who is showing the children how to make a clay pot with 3 different techniques in our art room. And that's called a coming in, when we bring in an outside expert to enhance what we are up to. Now, just to further unpack a bit what these subject areas entail in the elementary years, our math and geometry concepts are presented through hands-on materials first, if at all possible. And there are overlap materials between our Children's House program and our lower elementary and upper elementary programs. So the children come in and transition into our community, and they have these materials they remember and recognize. And in those first few weeks, they can take them off the shelves and continue to work with them in ways in which they were presented in kindergarten. But later we take those same materials and we do new, deeper things with them, which is really exciting for the children as we're moving from that concrete to the abstract. My favorite example of this is probably our long bead chains. And if you've toured our building or had any time in any Montessori setting, you've probably seen these colorful beads all collected up neatly in what we call a bead cabinet, which is a pretty big, like 3x3 cabinet on the wall, 3 foot by 3 foot. And there's hierarchies of numbers represented in these chains. And the children begin with these chains, taking them out in linear counting, 1, 2, 3, all the way. And pretty soon they notice each bar on the 3 chain has 3 beads on it. And they're counting by threes pretty soon. Skip counting, they call it 3, 6, 9. And when they come to elementary, they've had all of those hands-on experiences and understandings. And pretty quickly I tell them, well, you actually know your multiples of 3. We can move into multiples because they recognize the relationship between skip counting and, oh, those are my multiples, which are going to directly prepare that child for multiplication. And then one day we'll be in a lesson talking about squared numbers. And you take those chains and old friends from when they were 4 or 5 years old, and we fold them up, and they see that each chain creates the squared value of that number. And then when they're older, we have the long chains, and we can see that if we folded that up, it would create the cubic value of that number. So just Dr. Montessori was a genius in creating these materials that help move from the concrete to the abstract, and materials that grow with the children as they grow through our programs. Math is an area where in Montessori there's this gift of getting to work at your own pace. We're holding on to the national curricular standards, of course, but we also are presenting through the lens of Montessori pedagogy in multi-year classrooms. So as mentioned before with my fraction example, if someone's not quite ready for something, we have the ability to wait and to further support and to build them into readiness, to partner with that child to become ready to give that lesson at the right time. Language within Montessori is a very rich area, and is particularly in the lower elementary years, which are 6 to 9-year-olds. They're still in that sensitive period for language development, where literacy is a very big focus. As we know, the focus on literacy and the natural human time to gain those skills is prenatal through around 8 years old. So we have a large focus and emphasis on language development. We're thinking not only about reading and writing, but grammar, sentence structure, syntax, literature, all of these really big concepts. And as the child comes into the elementary, we're building really big skill sets. And then as they journey onward through elementary and into the upper elementary and middle school, a lot of refining of those skills is happening as well. We have children come in first grade sometimes who are just learning to write and form their letters correctly. And by the time they're leaving in 3rd grade, they may have written an entire report, learned how to word process it, bound it, made a diorama, and presented on a topic to their community. So there is a really big growth in literacy and language skills in elementary. Our biology work is really hands-on and really exciting, and we focus in on both botany and zoology, plants and animals, and ecology is another big piece of what we are focusing on. Our geography is, again, very hands-on. You saw the volcano and experiments with the 3 states of matter. And that is because it's exciting and we are working in small groups so we can safely fulfill some of these concepts with hands-on experiences. And we're thinking about chemistry, physics, meteorology, astronomy, earth science in conjunction with general geography studies with maps and globes and states and capitals and all of those really important things too. We're also starting to think about human geography and economics and what products are produced where in each state and in each country, and later what taxes and trade and all sorts of those more complex things. But it starts with what does Minnesota make, or Wisconsin if you're a Superior friend. History is also extremely rich in a Montessori setting, where history is really intertwined and at the center of everything we're doing. Every lesson that we give, we try to start with a story. And history concepts in Montessori are really centered around this sense of gratitude. And an exploration of the humans that were here before us, that took risks and discovered things and were innovative, and we may not even know their name or who she was or he was. Who was that person who harnessed fire that forever changed our lives? And we ask those questions and we say thank you together as a group, like thank you to that human who harnessed fire. I'm grateful for that because now I can, stay warm in my house on a regular basis, or I can cook my food. Music, art, and movement, as I've already touched on, are part of all of our works here at Many Rivers. We really value and intentionally foster opportunities for the children to express creatively through different mediums of art, songwriting, song performing, theater. We value and believe that every human being has both physical needs and spiritual needs, and one of those spiritual needs is creative expression, and that's a Montessori lesson as well. We intentionally integrate fine arts and things into our lessons, so we're giving lessons on principles of design and art concepts, but we also see those avenues as meaningful follow-up options for work. For example, if I gave a lesson on layers of the earth, a child could choose to get out clay and make a model of the earth and dry it and then paint it and label the different layers of the earth. And that is a really powerful way to demonstrate your understanding that didn't involve a lot of writing if that child maybe wasn't a strong writer yet, or that wasn't their favorite way to express themselves. They still had a valid and meaningful way to demonstrate their understanding of the key of the lesson I had just given. Now, a typical day, I do want to pause. I know parents often have questions regarding, well, what does a day look like in an elementary community? And it changes a little bit between upper elementary and lower elementary, but overall it's pretty similar. And what I'm going to speak to right now is a typical day in the lower elementary, which is currently where I'm teaching a 1st through 3rd grade class. We have what we call 2 uninterrupted work cycles throughout the day. And those in the morning, it's about 3 hours, and in the afternoon, it's about 2 hours. And those are periods of really beautiful, focused work time where the children are, using those materials on the shelves, being invited to small group lessons with me where they're getting a presentation of a new concept. And then quickly, we're turning it over to the children to go and do that follow-on work. And we try not to structure the children's time or day too much. They have the freedom of choosing what they are choosing to work on, but they know they have the responsibilities to be working in a variety of subject areas, to be following up on recent lessons that they've just had, and to be completing things that they've started. We have a value of completing what we start and being responsible to our work and accountable. Our day actually starts outside in the lower elementary, depending on what time a child arrives to school. If they're in our morning care program, unless it's below the -18 cutoff or lightning outside, we try to do as much of our before care and after care outside. And so if a child is in the morning care program, they would already be outside, but traditional drop-off starts at 8:10, 8:15. and the children start their day outside. And depending on when they're coming in that drop-off window, it does go through 8:30, and sometimes people run a little late. There's not a lot of consequence to that because we're having really awesome outdoor opportunities until about 8:55. The children are coming in and making that transition into the indoor learning spaces. Neurological research has shown us over and over again the benefits of gross motor activity before learning, and we thought we want to be a part of that. And so we've just a few years ago made that amendment to our day and now start our lower elementary outside. The upper elementary does go outside as well for a shorter, more targeted opportunity, maybe running some laps around the block or going to the gym and getting some more traditional PE activities and getting some outside time playing soccer or something. It is a value across the whole spectrum of 1st through 6th grade. We also, because of that literacy emphasis that I referenced earlier, provide an opportunity after our regular midday recess, which is about 45 minutes around the noon hour. When we come in from that, we have what's called book club, which is a time where each child is quietly working on a reading activity that is building their own skill set. And that might look like sight words if they're just learning how to identify and spell their sight words. It could be reading a chapter book. It could be reading with one of the adults in the community to work on fluency or work on blending phonemes or little parts of words. We also have at the very end of the day, after that second work cycle, what we call a read aloud time and a handwork time, which are actually happening at the same time. The children get to choose something like weaving or drawing or knitting or doing an extreme dot to dot, something that is getting their hands working, that they enjoy, building some hand skills. And at that time, the teacher is also reading from a piece of literature. It could be poetry, it could be a novel, and we're really thoughtfully selecting what we're sharing. It is a very treasured tradition in a Montessori community to have that time together at the end of the day, to be working with our hands and hearing a story. It's about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we go home. Before the handwork time, we do something called community jobs, and the children are responsible for helping to maintain and upkeep our communities. So they have a simple task, whether it's caring for the classroom pet or sweeping the floor, and it rotates throughout the year, dusting a shelf, organizing our library books. So they have about a 10-minute responsibility to the community at the end of the day as well. Now, as a child enters the elementary community or transitions into the elementary community from our children's house or another kindergarten program, we know that their development is allowing for them to experience more accountability, higher expectations, and regular check-ins and meetings with the guides are how we ensure that we can have this increasing level of responsibility. Younger children are invited to do their work in the kindergarten program or shown lessons, but really they get to choose what they want to work on without limits, and they could work on math for 2 days if they wanted without adding variety. In the elementary world, we do value and invite children to long periods of focused work on a specific topic or skill that they may have just learned, but they know that they're also within a week responsible to be considering other subject areas, other lessons they've had, and balance their work. If there is a concern or an observation that the children aren't keeping up with that work, we have a conversation. We're able to be very honest about that and encourage them and get them back on track. So we observe the children a great deal in the elementary community, both the trained guide and the assistant teacher. We have regular check-in meetings with the children based on how frequently they are needed for each individual. Sometimes it's weekly, sometimes it's every other week, every third week, if for a really responsible third grader, for example. And in these meetings, we review their work. Each child's maintaining a work diary or a little work journal each day where they're writing the date and what they're doing at different times of the day, if they were in a lesson, if they were doing their states and capitals follow-on work or long division or playing piano, whatever it might be. They're logging that in, and that's a place where we can look and ensure that they're getting done what they need to get done, and also that they are having variety and staying on target. Now, the social development of an elementary child is of a huge priority. You may have observed this in your child or will be very soon. Elementary children are incredibly social. Even quieter or more introverted children are more socially aware. They are observing what's going on around them. They do have an urge to engage and to be part of a community, even if it's done carefully. And then we have some children who are personality is a factor, and they're just ready for the bigger social scene. And we know that the academic work is still incredibly important and valuable, but we know that the social development is a big work at this age too. Coming into first grade, they're like social newborns. They want to be highly social. They want to observe and report on the socialness or behaviors of others, but they don't have yet the full sophisticated skill set to be a socially responsible citizen. So we build into our schedules and into the fabrics of our community how to have conversations, how to interrupt, how to problem solve, how to be an upstander, how to communicate with a friend in a time of disagreement, how to invite someone to work with you, for example, all of those things. And we know that those key skills are really important to that aid to life that we led off with in this talk today. To become a fully actuated, happy, joyful, productive citizen of the world, it's really important that you also have great intelligence, but these social skills refined as well. So conflict resolution is a piece of what we are focusing on. What are the protocols of the community? What is our group plan, and how do we help each other adhere to that for different reasons? And how to do successful collaborative group work that is equitable to all the group members and the skill sets that each of us have, our strengths and our weaknesses, and what we each can bring to the table to create something really beautiful and exciting. We, at the beginning of each year in an elementary community, create what we call a class constitution that is unique to that community, but of course it's thematic across all of our classrooms. We start with the question of what kind of community do we want to be? And we have returning children in each class who have done this before, even 2 years, sometimes 3 years, and they're eager to lead off and to say, we want to be a fun community, and we want to be a kind community, and we want to be hardworking, we want to be safe, and we fill the marker board with all of these incredible attributes. And when we feel we're done and we're ready to move to the next stage, then we reflect, well, what would we have to do? What would be the actions that would help us be described in this way? And we write down, if we want to be safe, we shouldn't run in the community, so on and so forth. If we want to be known as kind, we should be good listeners and be inclusive. And what does that look like on a daily basis? And when it's all done, we create this document that we call the class constitution. A small group of children go off and create it how they see it, usually watercolor painting with text written on it. And each member of the community then signs it, and you frame it or post it in the community, and it's always there for us to remember and to value. And then when there are difficulties, because there are and there will be, as we're developing and learning to be social and experiencing the highs and lows of life in the context of a community, we can go back to that document and say, well, next time I need you to try it differently. What could you do differently? Because remember, we value safety. We value respect. What could we do or you do to show that you value that next time? Now, the big question, right? and we've gleaned on it many, many times, but I just want to further clarify what sets a Montessori elementary education apart. You can get a wonderful education many places, but what are you signing up for when you choose to join a Montessori community? Montessori is a very holistic and interdisciplinary approach to education. Montessori children acquire the same basic skills and academic accomplishments that the Common Core state standard movement is trying to achieve, but we just do it through a different way. We're leaning very heavily on a hands-on approach that's rooted in human development, and we're offering concepts and key lessons at timing that is logical for each child in their own sphere of development, but through a progression within our 3-year cycles. I like to tell people, usually we're able to welcome people into our communities to observe firsthand and be hosted by the children and served tea and get to see the real hum of our community. And I often go to the Q&A sessions after that, and parents are just so blown away and excited by or moved by what they saw. But I think it's really important to share in all humility that these aren't magical children. These aren't, hand-selected beings. Some of our children enroll on paper before they're even born. Their parents have signed them up for our toddler program, or they're coming in from different schools all along the way of our trajectory of classroom settings. But really the difference is that these children have been invited to just learn and to be in a different way than other educational settings are offering. Now, in a Montessori classroom or Montessori setting, we are also actively encouraging children to develop many other abilities aside from and apart from academics. Academics are incredibly important to us, and our children actually test in the 3rd through 8th grade. We do the Iowa Basic testing, and very consistently we are seeing our children testing well above average overall. And as I mentioned, they're not magical beings. We have the whole bell curve of ability here at Many Rivers and personality as children join us at a very young age, but they're just resourced and supported to reaching their fullest potential. And we're not as concerned about those tests. They show us something about how the child is doing and how our programs are doing, but they're not the be-all, end-all. And testing and homework and those sorts of pieces of a traditional approach don't really have a place formally in a Montessori pedagogy, but we do see some value in the reading assessments and Iowa Basic testing. We are encouraging our children to develop abilities such as to think and to act independently. We want our children to creatively and comprehensively engage in the world. We want our children to grow to be accountable and responsible about their own commitments. We want our children to be able to work collaboratively and successfully in a group context. We want to emphasize and care for and about others, and to care about the world at large. That is a very big piece of Montessori that I didn't have as much time to build into this talk, but service and this sense of gratitude, service learning projects, serving the classrooms, serving the school, serving the Duluth area through community outreach is really an important part of our approach as well. We want our children to view themselves as contributors, seeking to discover what they might offer to society and to humanity. And we want our children to be lifelong learners and to feel great joy in that journey. School should be exciting. It should be a place where you feel you belong and where you want to engage and feel great joy in that process. In conclusion, I have this small photo clip art here of a beehive with some bees, and it is a little bit cheesy, but it represents a really big concept Dr. Montessori wrote about and talked about specific to the elementary. A Montessori elementary classroom should be an exciting, buzzing environment. It should be buzzing with purposeful activity as the children are exercising their intellectual curiosities and engaging with one another and discovering things. It shouldn't be a silent library setting. Of course, we're attentive to our volume and our interactions, but you're going to see children doing experiments over here, and then children working through a collaborative lung division problem with Rex and tubes over here, children making a gorgeous history timeline on the floor over here, children reading in the library. There's so many different types of work happening simultaneously with joy in a Montessori environment with that buzz. A Montessori elementary classroom is rooted in personal relationships and trust and accountability, guided by the principles, again, of freedom and responsibility. But because I get to have my students for upwards of 3 to 6 years, I know who they are deeply as an individual. I know what their potential is. I know what's happening in their development. I'm highly trained in human development, as are all of our guides here. So I can trust in the process, and I can trust that, we might not be able to read fluently and independently today, but I trust by the time you leave third grade, we're going to do everything we can to help grow that skill and get you reading. So that 3-year cycle really supports our ability to be relationally engaged and to observe the child, to see their work, and to know the bigger picture of who they are and how they work best. Montessori elementary guides and teachers, as I said, are highly trained in both academic pursuits. We all have, bachelor's degrees. Lots of us have master's degrees. And then on top of that, we've went and did rigorous AMI Montessori diploma programs where we get even more educational philosophy and understanding of human development. And this allows for us to be greatly equipped to observe the children, to respond to what they're needing, and to ensure that each child is getting what he or she or they may need to reach their fullest potential. And that concludes what I have for you today. I know that was a lot of information, and believe me, I wish I could share even more with you, but I hope that provided you with a nice, detailed and deep overview of what to expect and how we meet the Montessori elementary child's needs on a regular basis. Thank you.